All right, so we might as well get started on time. So thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon or evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. My name is Peggy Kuiper. I know a lot of you know me. Some of you might not. I'm the Director of Sport and Recreation Business at UAF and an Associate Professor here as well. We have a very exciting lineup for you tonight. And as this is part of this, the third part of our fall speaker series. First and foremost, thank you to Melissa, Josh, Chris, and Cait for joining us tonight. We're really fortunate to have you, and we're excited to learn from you tonight. Also, thank you to Michelle for setting this up. Again, Michelle's a rock star adjunct of ours in the School of Management, and also works for the Dallas Cowboys as a corporate partnership marketing manager. It's always a mouthful to say that. Also, thanks to Spencer Jacobs, our awesome student assistant who helps with a lot of the logistics behind the scenes. And then, as always, thanks to Mark Herman. If you want to give a wave, Mark. He is super innovative and very supportive of this initiative, and also a huge sports fan, and we won't hold his favorite teams against him, nor will we mention it. So anyways, without further ado, Michelle, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Peggy, and thanks again to Mark and all the support throughout the department that allows us to have these really awesome seminars and bring in some industry experts to give you guys a peek behind the curtain about what they do every day and how you get into a job like this and so on and so forth. So as the third session in this speaker series seminar, we are focusing on data and analytics. It has become such a big part of our world in sports and recreation business. And we have some of the best in the business here on our panel to chat with you tonight. A few housekeeping rules really quickly, if you guys don't mind. Keep your microphone on mute, please, throughout the panel, just because we don't want any feedback. It might be hard to hear the panelists while they're speaking if you're not on mute. And aside from that, this is meant to be incredibly conversational. So if you are comfortable with it, keep your cameras on. We like to talk to faces sometimes instead of black squares. So if you're comfortable with it, I would encourage you to keep your camera on. And then also, please use the chat feature on Zoom to submit any questions that pop up throughout the evening and throughout the panel. We will do our best to get to all of them, and I will be monitoring them throughout as well. And we will be sure to hit them now or potentially post-panel. But as Peggy mentioned, my name is Michelle. I'm an adjunct at UAF. It's my first year with the program, so it's very exciting so far. And aside from that, I work for the Dallas Cowboys in corporate partnership marketing. So if you ever go to a sporting event and you see Pepsi signage, or you see a video board feature that has a mascot race and it's sponsored by Whataburger or McDonald's, and you get to test some sort of new cola on your way into the stadium, that's all part of my job. So we work with these big brands and we provide them a platform to market to our fans, and that platform is our team. And then we have Josh Shire, Chris Thompson, Mel Koop, and Dr. Cait Wilson on our panel today. And I will let them introduce themselves. I will not do it justice because they are all rock stars and amazing in the industry. So I have talked too much already at this point. So I will let the panelists go ahead and introduce themselves. And Cait, why don't we go ahead and start with you? You just give your name, your organization, a little overview of what you do, and then we can move on throughout the panel.
Yeah, so I work at YouGov right now. I'm a senior research manager, and I feel like a lot of the time people have never heard of YouGov before. So we do political polling. So during the most recent election, you might have seen on some of the news channels some of our polls. But what people don't really know is that we are a global market research agency. So we do custom market research for a lot of different companies. So I work specifically in the tech industry. So I do custom quantitative research, so surveys, or qualitative research, doing interviews with people with a lot of the large tech companies in the Bay Area. So I feel like I'm a bit of a wild card on this panel to give a different perspective, but I do also work closely with YouGov Sport, which works with a lot of professional sports teams as well as esports and gaming. So that's my role at YouGov.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And to frame it for everybody on this call as well, let's say the Cowboys are potentially looking at a partner in the tech industry. That's something that we would leverage YouGov for. So they tell us things like how brands sit in the market right now, if consumers are aware of certain brands, and so on and so forth. So we'll get into it a little bit more later, but I wanted to make sure to set the stage for you all as well. Moving on, Chris, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Chris Thompson. I am the Director of Analytics for the Portland Timbers of MLS and the Portland Thorns of the NWSL. Basically, what I do in my role is I help oversee the overall data strategy of the company for both teams on the business side. So whether that's how we engage with our fans, how do they respond, pricing about our tickets, how we should go to market with our tickets, you know, going deeper into that, overseeing the data systems and how they interact with each other, and doing a lot of different mathematical modeling, surveying. There's about a million different things that I probably do that I probably don't have time to go over at this point, but basically I had up all of that for the company here in Portland.
So if you ever found yourself asking it in high school or now, you know, how will I really use math in the real world? This is the panel that explains how. So just make sure you pay attention. Josh, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi all, I'm Josh Shire. I work for the Oilers Entertainment Group and primarily with the Edmonton Oilers of the NHL, but also our minor league teams and our arena. And I am the corporate sales business analyst. So primarily I run all the research as on the corporate sponsorship side. And that includes any primary research that we put out, so any surveys that we give out to our fan base, and also deciphering secondary research from companies like YouGov and other vendors that we use, as well as running our internal database systems, anything to just make our corporate sales team more intelligent and helping them understand what to sell, where to sell, and what to go after, and preparing a lot of beautiful charts and presentation decks. So they sound smart when they go out there. And I do all that stuff internally for the organization.
Thank you, Josh. And folks like Josh, that type of team is just so integral to making our corporate partnership teams a success, right? You know, gone are the days where you just find a brand that would spend ad dollars and buy what we call spots and dots, right? So signage in the outfield, dasher boards in hockey. Josh, Chris, Cait, and Mel, they all make us smarter to go ahead and be more strategic with our initiatives. So speaking of Mel, go ahead and introduce yourself as well.
Hi, I am Mel Koop. I work for the Phoenix Suns. I am a senior business intelligence analyst for them, which essentially I just do analytics for our ticket sales department. And so anytime you buy a season ticket plan, if you're a member, we do analytics on how can we get you to be a member, how can we retain you to be a member, and the whole gamut of who should we be targeting to become members. Any sales initiatives that our sales leadership wants to know, I will help assist them with that.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And if you guys haven't noticed already, the common thread between all of these different roles is revenue, right? We're trying to weaponize our data in order to increase revenue, whether that's in ticket sales, if it's a corporate partnership, if it's with tech brands, no matter what it is, we're trying to weaponize our information to increase revenue. So I know all that are on this call, you know, may not have a lot of experience in data analytics, not really even know where to start in order to educate themselves on the topic. So something I would like to pose to everyone on the panel is just, could you tell us a little bit about what you studied in school and kind of the path that you took to get to this type of role? I think we're seeing it become more and more demanding, roles like these, and they're popping up a lot more in organizations. So tell us a little bit about your journey and what you studied and how exactly you got here. And we can start with Cait.
Yeah, so all of my degrees have been in sport and recreation. So I was really, you all sitting here, I was doing my undergrad a couple years ago, way back when. And so I studied sport and recreation all the way through my master's and into my PhD. And I started realizing about halfway through my PhD that I was really gravitating toward the research side of things. And I was noticing that what was truly interesting to me was understanding people, understanding their behaviors, understanding their preferences, things like that. So in my third year of my PhD, I started realizing that I wasn't going to be going into academia. So I had to find other jobs that were focused on research specifically. So I ended up finding the market research industry, and I loved it because in the market research industry, you can study sport, you can study tourism, you can study consumer packaged goods, entertainment, media, leisure and lifestyle, tech, which is what I'm doing. So I was happy that through my PhD, I had all these research skills that I could apply to the market research industry. So that made that transition from academia pretty easy into an industry job in the market research industry. So that's how I ultimately ended up landing in my current role, was just transitioning out of my PhD into the role.
And in a role like yours, Cait, is a PhD something that you have to have in order to be where you are, or is that a leg up for you, or what are most people around you also doing and studying?
Yeah, so you definitely do not need to have a PhD. So if that's something that you're not interested in doing, you can still have a awesome, amazing, fulfilling career in data and analytics. So don't think that you have to go that route. I decided to do it just because I thought maybe I wanted to be a professor. So I wanted to have that PhD in my back pocket in case that was a route that I wanted to take. I also didn't want to live with what ifs in my life. I didn't want to live with what if I would have gone back to school? What if I would have done a PhD? I didn't want to live with any regrets. So I just decided to do it because I was interested in it and ended up getting it. And I think it's been beneficial for me personally. But I don't think you need to go this route in order to get a career in what I'm doing either.
Yeah, that makes sense. And if you guys can't hear it, Cait's Canadian. So if you haven't picked up on that yet, and so is Shire. We have 2 Canadians on this call, so just keep an ear out. But Cait, it sounds like even though obviously you don't have to have a PhD for this role, if I'm hearing you correctly, the research skills that you gain throughout that PhD program, you're really able to use though in your current role, and it's beneficial.
Yeah, I use my research skills that I learned in my PhD every single day. And I don't think I could have personally learned all these things without the PhD, but there are so many people who learn these skills in other places. I personally just wanted to go through a structured 4-year program to really dive deep and develop all the skills, but you do not need to take the 4 years at all.
Well, the plus is people call you doctor now, so it definitely paid off.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I think that's really helpful, especially, in the role that you sit now and from that perspective. Josh Shire, would love to hear from you about your journey a little bit. And if Josh and I were in grad school together, and Josh was the token data guy throughout our program. So how did you become the token data guy, Josh?
Well, yeah. How you all doing, eh? I just wanted to be a little Canadian. So in undergrad, I actually studied political science and economics, and I always liked the number side of economics, but hated the theory, and always liked the theory of political science and hated the philosophy of it. So I originally thought I was going to get into political polling, and that's what I started doing. And then it was just part of the industry that I didn't like, and I always had this underlying passion for sports. So I decided to get a master's of sports administration and a master's of business administration in the U.S. But I always liked the numbers side. I always had a skill set in the numbers side. And when I was getting my MBA, my MSA, I noticed that there was sort of a need and a growing part of the industry of research and sort of more mathematical based skill set. So I just gradually started going into that because I saw a need for it. I saw a lot of opportunity growing in it when I would eventually be looking for jobs. And I just fell in love with it, just like Cait said about the research side. And one of my favorite parts of it is that you kind of always get to be in different functions. Like I'm not only working in one industry. I'm not only working trying to sell a single product. I do research with automobiles, with fast food industry, with the tech industry, anything that we can look to sell. So I just like finding out what makes people tick and what they like and what they don't like. And market research sort of led me to that. And I started doing it in sports because there was an inherent love for it with me, especially for someone like myself who grew up in Edmonton and had an opportunity to move back home with the Oilers and work for them. And it was just sort of a perfect fit with my own skill set and what I wanted to end up doing and what was starting to grow in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that need is just going to continue to grow as time goes on. And it's almost like, Josh, you have the opportunity to be an expert in multiple different verticals, and you're really not pigeonholed into really selling one product to one company or one vertical. You get to explore multiple different facets of the business. So I can see why that interest is there for sure. Mel, go ahead and talk to us a little bit about your journey, because I know you're more on the ticket side where, Josh is a little bit more on the corporate partnership side. So would love to hear about your perspective and your path.
Yeah, so actually similar. And my undergrad was math. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was a student athlete, so I knew I loved sports. I chose math because I figured it would give me the most opportunity, and I was good at it. And so then after graduation, it was probably my senior year, I was like, oh, I like math, I like sports. Let's kind of pursue the sports world, see if there's any opportunities there. And so I came down to Phoenix to come to ASU for my master's in sports law and business. So I had that undergrad and then master's kind of path. Don't know if it's necessarily needed, but for my case, I wanted to get more exposure to the sports world. And so it was in my master's program that I had an analytics class, and I was like, this is it. Marries my two passions. I still can do my analytics. I can still do how I think, but I get to pair it and do it in an industry that excites me and is interested to me. In regards to kind of being more on the ticket sales side, for me, I just kind of got lucky, and this was my first job after my master's program. And I just come to love it. I knew I wanted to be on the business side because there is the whole Moneyball analytics side where you're analyzing whether it's basketball or sports analytics, whatever it may be. And I knew I wasn't in basketball. I wasn't in any of those sports. So I wanted to be more on the business side, and that was what my background was in. And so I pretty much leveraged my 2 degrees, and then I had some experience in some research. I worked at the University of Minnesota as a research assistant for a program that specifically does research on girls and women in sports and how they can be more of an impact and how we can increase numbers and making it more profitable. And also on the flip side of like how women can be better or having women role models for girls in sports. But pairing that research gave me that research bind and a good base. And so I got lucky out of undergrad or out of my master's program to land this position and have grown a lot since.
There we go. That's fantastic. That research in particular sounds incredibly interesting. And if you guys have noticed, you have a lot of areas you can go to in data and analytics. It's if you start in ticket sales, Mel, it may end up on the business side, or Josh could end up in premium tickets. It's very transferable, and you gain some of those foundational skills to to be more marketable, and your career could change, you know, as you take your journey in data analytics. Chris, go ahead and share a little bit about your journey and how you ended up in Portland.
Yeah, so I also started, like Josh, in my undergrad with a economics degree and a political science minor, but I don't use the political science minor very much anymore. I was lucky enough to do research with a couple professors during my undergrad, and you know, that got me into the world of research, how to put together models, did a bunch of different academia sort of stuff. Going to conferences, presenting that, and then I stumbled into internships that were local with a minor league baseball team. So I ended up interning with them on the operations side. Didn't have much to do with what I thought I would do with my undergrad, mostly doing operations of the day-to-day park, selling tickets, selling sponsorships, and after I graduated, I ended up doing that full time. So I worked for the minor league team for a couple years and got the opportunity to go to Minnesota United when they started up in MLS, and joined their ticket operations and analytics team and built it up from there. So my path is a little different. I didn't go on to more academia after my undergrad. I just jumped right into the sports world and just kind of worked my way up from there. The big thing that I learned kind of in my minor league days is how to tell a story. That's kind of really important when you're getting into data analytics, especially when, you know, the four of us really get into the weeds on something, but then we have to explain to, you know, a CEO or a vice president, you know, how exactly that works for them, not giving them the whole number layout, but providing in a simple, easy story that they can then take to prospective clients, or an easy way to bring to the marketplace through marketing that we can capitalize on. So then I provided value in Minnesota, developed a few things there, and then worked my way up within the organization there, and eventually got the job here in Portland.
Yeah, and you know, it's really interesting for all the students that are on this call. Something to take away from this is that between Cait, Josh, Chris, and Mel, all of them have started to specialize as time went on, right? They had math undergrads, economics, political science, whatever it might be. They had the ability to really hone in on what their passion, their interests were as their young careers developed. So if you're sitting out there thinking you might have an interest in data analytics, don't feel like you have to hone in on that and decide right now, that is what I want to do, data analytics in sports. Obviously, there's a lot of applications within data analytics and opportunities. Just it seems like the foundation across all of you is some sort of passion for math, which I don't share personally, so more power to you. And understanding people, which is the part that I do care about. And that's why data analytics is such an important part of our business every day. I think that's actually a great segue. Josh, I want to come back to you really quick because you work probably the heaviest on the business operations side of the sports organization. And I know, you know, when I make a request to our data guy, we have a data guy, and you ask for all this information, right? And there's two ways that this could go. They could give you a spreadsheet or a chart that has all these numbers, or like Chris alluded to earlier, they can really start to use these numbers to tell a story about the partnership, about successes. So Josh, I would love to hear from you a little bit from your organizational standpoint, how you're seeing data being used as a storytelling technique, and what are the most important pieces of that when putting it together for your partners?
For sure. So I'm going to kind of answer the second one first. The most important piece of data is, in my opinion, any data that answers the question that's trying to be asked. So if we're trying to get a sponsorship in a certain category, let's say automobiles, I want to see how many people in Edmonton, or whether I'm talking about our greater area, Alberta, which is our province, own a certain type of car. And with the access to the data sources I have, and I want to make it clear, I'm the only person that ever really looks at the raw data in our organization, and then I'll pare it down, I'll make presentations, and I'll show that to our sponsorship team or our executive vice presidents or a potential sponsorship client. But when I'm looking at the data, I can find out examples of how many cars are in the city are owned, how many people are looking to buy a car in the next 12 months, whether people want a Ford or a Volvo. And I can answer all these types of questions, and then we can keep on going from a story from there. So if I find out, and I'm just going to throw a random example, 100,000 people that are Oiler fans in the city of Edmonton are going to buy a Ford in the next year, I can then take the average price of a Ford, let's say $25,000, and say, with your sponsorship, you can reach these 100,000 people. Each might spend $25,000 on a car. Now your sponsorship is worth X amount of money, right? X amount of millions. And you will get the access to reach all these people for the low, low price of this dasher board, this signage, or whatever you're willing to spend to get your eyes on these people. But the type of data that I always think is most important is whatever answers the question and helps tell the story that you're trying to do. And that can be different in other ways. Internally, I can find out that Oiler fans like pizza more than hamburgers by a severe amount. So I can go to our food and beverage department and tell them we should have more pizza stands than hamburger stands because our fan base is more likely to like those. Or we like hockey jerseys to wear more than t-shirts because it's -20 outside. So we should sell more jerseys and things like that. So data, with the access to it now that we've seen in the industry, has become so much more important and so much more accessible so that we can answer almost any question that we get asked. And we've seen it on this panel as well, whether it's a ticketing question or a marketing question or a sponsorship question. The access to data is really our only limiting factor, and then we just have to tell the story from there.
Yeah, and I think you gave a really good example, and I want to back up just for a minute. So I want to frame that in the sales process for you guys, right? So if I'm going out to sell on behalf of the Cowboys and I go to Ford and I pitch them a deal, and I say, you should spend this money with us for our fan base. And they say, oh, like, why? Show us why. If I have no data and I just say, well, I just think you should, I'm probably not going to get that sale, right? And we're probably not going to get that partnership. But with arming ourselves with the information that Josh just said, it's like, hey, well, Dallas Cowboys fans are 15% more likely to buy a new car, let alone a new truck, in the next year. That kind of perks the ears up for the folks at Ford, right? They're like, oh, okay, well, that turns into potential customers for them. So then we strategize on how we can get those Cowboys fans that are more likely to buy the cars in touch with Ford and get their brand in front of them. So that's where the advertising aspect comes into it. But that data, Josh, of let's say 25% Oiler fans are looking to buy a new car in the next 12 months, where does that come from?
So that can come from two places. The first place would be our own internal surveys that we push out to our own email databases, and our email database is built from people that buy tickets, that have bought merchandise from us. And so that's our primary research, but most often, if we want a general view of the public, that would be secondary research to us. And that's from places like YouGov or other companies that we work with, that we pay a flat fee every year to subscribe to these databases. And they send out surveys upon surveys that give a very strong sample size in the market. And we can extrapolate that information to show what it would be for the entire market in general. So if any of you have ever gotten something in mail or email now from companies like Nielsen or YouGov, oftentimes those surveys get used by people like us or in other industries like tech or food and beverage, just so they can understand what their populace is thinking.
Yeah, and that's actually a great segue to, since we have Cait from YouGov here, to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so basically a lot of the time clients come to us because we do have this huge database of people who are taking surveys all the time. So we do have a product that's called Profiles, and we have people surveyed on anything you could imagine. So we have their demographics, we have what their interests are, we have their purchasing behaviors, we have their preferences, we have anything that you could think you want to know about someone, we have that profiled. So for example, Josh at the Edmonton Oilers would come to us and he would say, I want to know specifically about Edmonton Oilers fans. And we could say, okay, we can filter all of this data on Edmonton Oilers fans specifically, and we can figure out anything you want to know. What are they drinking? What are they eating? What cars are they purchasing? What social media are they using? What websites are they going to? So if you want to market to these individuals, we know where to target those individuals. If you want to go for a sponsorship deal, what brand should you approach? So that's kind of the benefit of working with a vendor, is because we have all of this data. And so we can kind of give you all the answers that you need to go and approach all the different brands that you want to work with.
How often, Cait, are you guys talking to these people, collecting this data? So if I, the Dallas Cowboys, want to know about Cowboys fans who visit casinos in September, if I come back, the next year around December, is it going to be a different group of people? Should I expect to see the same numbers and so on and so forth?
So it's refreshed weekly. So that's the key benefit of our product, is that we always have fresh new data. So you get what's most relevant in the here and the now. You're not getting something that may be irrelevant and was collected months ago. So you're getting what's going on with consumers right now.
And a great example of YouGov in practice, I actually just used a stat today, actually. We were using it to showcase value, which is such an important part of my job and what we do on the corporate partnership side. It was with our casino, and they were the title sponsor of a game one week. So it was Dallas Cowboys versus Atlanta Falcons, presented by WinStar World Resort and Casino. And during that week, YouGov recorded a 20% brand lift in perception of WinStar. So now people, because of all of the exposure they had through this title game, people were starting to perceive them in a more positive way. So that's a type of data that we get from YouGov. And I think it's important to note too that, Josh, I think you made a great point. The most important data is the data that answers the questions being asked. And on the business side, we get a lot of partners that come to us with certain objectives, right? We decide them together. This is what we want the partnership to do. This is how we want it to work for us. And one of WinStar's was speaking more intelligently to their patrons and Dallas Cowboys fans. So through YouGov, we're able to see so many statistics on how we can help WinStar do that. Cowboys fans who go to casinos might have an affinity for musical acts or something along those lines. And WinStar is building a brand new global event center. So now we know we should be talking about that global event center to Cowboys fans who also like casinos, so on and so forth. So there are a million applications for it. We could probably sit here for hours, but I do want to talk to Chris a little bit. Now we've heard how Josh, the NHL, the Oilers handle data and how they use Cait at YouGov. Chris, talk to us a little bit about how you guys are using data over at the MLS and the NWSL, especially with the NWSL. It's such a growing league. It's got to be pretty interesting to see some of the trends that are happening.
Yeah, it's definitely two different worlds when it comes to comparing the two teams, which is great and also a challenge at the same time. I'm not only operating the data analytics for one MLS team, I'm working it for essentially two MLS-sized teams.
So you have nothing on your plate.
Yeah, three plates. So I think a lot of what you're seeing with the MLS and NWSL right now is that pre-COVID, the large majority of revenue for both leagues comes from game day. So you saw a lot of investment in how do you extract the most revenue out of game day, because we don't have the amount of games that baseball and NBA has, and we don't have the TV deals that the NFL and NBA has to really shore up kind of, you know, our revenue on the sponsor and corporate sponsorship side, just because the TV value isn't there yet. That you're seeing a lot of future value in the MLS expansion franchises on this future value of the TV broadcast deals with the popularity and growth of soccer generally. So a lot of what I did in my time in Minnesota, we started in 2017, 2018, working out at TCF Bank Stadium in Minneapolis, and we eventually moved into Allianz Field in 2019. So part of my job then was to analyze how fans are buying tickets, and then essentially more or less blindly price out how Allianz Field should look. And, you know, the way we set it up is to have it in a lot of big upsides through mathematical modeling, seeing how people are buying and selling tickets at TCF, although not a perfect replica of Allianz Field, obviously. There's a lot more value in a brand new stadium. But, you know, use it as a template on, well, how many season tickets should we sell? How many single games should we sell? How many group tickets should we sell? And then from there, we developed an internal pricing system that it's called dynamic pricing, where essentially works as when you go to a hotel or an airline, you see one price, and then maybe the next week you see a higher price because there's a higher demand, or you see a lower price because maybe those haven't sold so well. Well, we took that into the ticketing sphere, and we did that internally, and that helped us create a lot more upside to extract the most value out of every game day at Allianz Field. So you're seeing a lot of investment and time put forth into that, but also seeing it more in, you know, Josh and Cait talked about this already, is surveying. That's the best way to know what your fans' wants and needs are, and you get the knack of what questions you need to ask to extract the answers that you're looking for. There are answers to the questions you're looking for. You can ask the same question about 1,000 different ways and get about 1,000 different answers, so you need to be very careful into what questions you're asking. And then you can do some A/B testing and, you know, get a lot of different answers out of that. So a lot of teams like myself, LAFC, a lot of the new teams like Nashville are really heavily invested in hiring people that their only job is just surveying. They develop surveys, they analyze them, and bring them back to their marketing teams, their corporate sponsorship, and their ticket sales. And I think you also see a lot of people getting more into the IT side of things, where it's so important to have all of your data in this common model, where it's easily accessible to everybody in the organization, just because what Josh uses is going to be completely different to what Mel uses. So it's very important that those two systems communicate well, and you need to have some sort of ability to learn about computer systems in order to make those pieces talk to each other and be able to extract the information you want out of a vast pool of information.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, what's interesting is you're probably not the only league facing that gate revenue issue this year. Mel, you guys have probably seen some of that with the Suns, you know, with not having a season at home. So I'm sure that was a challenge for you guys this year, especially in your role when you're analyzing like your ticket campaigns, where if you don't have games, you don't have a ticket campaign to run. So talk to us a little bit about that, and maybe how some of the data has influenced some of the campaigns in the past. But I would really be interested to hear about the strategy this year with some of those COVID wrenches thrown in the mix.
Yeah, COVID has thrown a lot of wrenches in the mix, but yeah, like when we went back, I guess the fun thing about analytics, going back to when we had to go to the bubble, is, all right, well, we switched our analytics from, all right, how much revenue can we make? Where are we seeing revenue from? To, all right, how can we retain revenue? What sources are working? And so that's how we kind of did it. It was tough because, like kind of Chris said as well, we don't have the gate, we weren't having fans, and so we had to rely on the sponsorship side. So what Josh, Michelle, what you guys do for overall organizations, revenue. But for for this upcoming season, we will be targeting this 2021 season, our fans, a lot differently than how we'll do in the following season. Like, for example, we have a group product. We won't be selling groups this upcoming season because of COVID. And so it's understanding what products are available and we can sell for this upcoming season. And then hopefully once we get to the 21-22 season for us, we can have all our products back, from full season ticket memberships, half seasons. We have mini-year plans. We also have suites. And so it's just understanding what products are available and who can we target for those. And so speaking of the campaigns that you mentioned, Michelle, we create campaigns on, all right, who do we want buying flex plans, or who have we seen in the past? What does that flex plan buyer look like? And when I say flex plan, I apologize, I'm speaking work, but it's a mini plan. So someone who maybe wants to buy 7 games for the season or 10 games for the season, rather than they want to buy all of our games for the season. So it's a mini-year plan. So what people do we want to target for that, versus who do our full season ticket membership look like? They're more affluent. Where do they live? I know, like, kind of with Cait, I don't know if you guys at YouGov, if you do any lead lists for purchase, but we'll buy lead lists from a third party who has data on, all right, who bought a home in the Phoenix area over $1 million. And so we can get that list of their addresses, and then we can create a campaign off of that and target them. And then on my side, I'm tracking that campaign. How successful is it? How much revenue is it generating? And then who are these people? So that we can bring in new business. And then you can also do that on our current clients, our current season ticket holders. All right, who is renewing their season ticket memberships year over year? What causes them to renew? What are those variables or values to them of, like, why are they renewing? Things like, how long have they been? And Chris, I don't know if you guys do, I know you mentioned modeling, but you might have a retention model. And so you're creating, all right, how likely is Susie going to renew versus Joe gonna renew? And you put in those variables of how many games did they attend, how long have they been a member, what's their price, a bunch of different variables of even things of, like, how many times our sales reps have contacted this person, how much are they engaging with our social media, things like that we'll put into our model to see how likely someone is to renew. And so that's kind of the fun thing and I think all of us can speak to, there's a lot of different ways and a lot of questions that will get asked. And so it keeps the job interesting, and there's always kind of different ways that you can look at it and try and pull that information.
Yeah, when I hear you all speak about your roles and how you're using data analytics and some of your everyday tasks and responsibilities, I feel like there's a common theme of, like, maximizing opportunity for your organization or for brands, right? And using math, science, and data to back that. And not just saying, I think a lot of Cowboys fans would buy Fords, but saying we know a lot of Cowboys fans would buy Fords, and having the confidence to go forth with that partnership, and then be able to ultimately deliver on strategic business objectives, right? You guys are all the people that make my job easier, so thank you. But I have to say, Chris, when we were talking about dynamic pricing and you gave the airline example, I was like, I can't count the amount of times I've cursed that person on the airline side in my head when I looked at a flight and it was $100 and I came back the next week and it was $300. But so it's all strategic. It's all on the back end. They all know everything. So I think that was a great round of questions. You guys provided some great insight. And we had some really interesting questions come in upon registration, which I would love to get y'all's opinion on. And I think the first, for the students on this call, and Peggy, you put something great in the chat that I would advise all the students to take a look at. But since there are an increasing number of jobs that are looking for experience in data, science, and analytics, as a student, what can you do? What are some of the tactical things you can do to prepare yourself with some of these skills that you need before entering the workforce or applying for a job?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I would start with your capstone projects, make those very intentional. And if you're interested in data and analytics, make sure it's a project that has to do with that. If you can partner with a brand or a team, that would be even better. And then also when I was in my PhD, I would go to conferences and I would just try and meet people who had jobs that I wanted. And then I would take advantage of being a student because people are willing to help students a lot of the time. So just ask them and say, is there anything that I can help you with? Is there anything that I can do? Because you just need a couple projects and a couple of examples and stories that you can talk about in an interview to be able to tell why you're qualified for the job. And then if you have those stories, you're more likely to land the gig. I had to do it unpaid, but the ideal is for it to be paid. But I kind of just sucked it up and went and did some of the things unpaid and just on top of all the other stuff I was doing in my program as well.
Cait, a follow-up question for you there. You know, you talk about doing some of these projects and be able to talk about them in an interview, but is there a way that you need to be able to showcase what you've done in research, like a portfolio of sorts when you're applying for jobs like these?
Yeah, so I put together an online portfolio, which kind of puts together all the projects that I've worked on. And basically, you want to focus on what's the impact that you had, what impact did the research have on some sort of business objective. So it definitely outlines kind of, okay, what did you do? What method did you use in order to get to that answer? And then how did that impact the business? So if you have that on an online portfolio, that's amazing. And I feel like employers, the fact that you went above and beyond and even have a portfolio sets you apart so much, and people are so impressed by that. So that's what I did personally. I have a website and have everything outlined.
I think that's great advice. And I think it's really, you made a really important point there, is talking about the impact on a business objective, right? Because when we talk about data and analytics, it's all great, but if it didn't do anything, then it's almost irrelevant, right? So we need to talk about the relevant to what and how it made an impact. So I think that's really important, Cait. I think it's a great point. Josh, Mel, or Chris, feel free to jump in on any tactical things you can advise students to do at this point.
Yeah, I can jump in on that. One thing that even something I've been doing is because the industry, especially around analytics, changes so much, there's always new skills to learn and new programs to learn. So personally, even though it's not directly related to what I currently do with the Oilers, it's something that we may implement in the future. And I see other organizations do it, is learning different types of internet languaging. So whether it's Python, R, SQL, and there's even something as basic as Excel. If you guys can get better in something like Excel, because I promise you every team uses it so much. And there's online programs, online certifications, but anything that you can prove to a potential employer that not only am I good at this, but I understand it, I can jump right in on it right away, and I could potentially make your life easier because I know it. And if we are looking to implement it in the future, I'm the one that can teach it to the organization, is completely invaluable. And that's something that is really easy to do now, because there's just more and more online courses being made available. And since we're all stuck in our homes and it's super cold outside, from at least where I am, it's something to do.
Yeah, I think that, in any facet of business, sports, or recreation that you go into, I think that's a very important point. Just to constantly, be educating yourself and keeping up with the industry, because like you said, Josh, it changes so much. I wish I paid a little bit more attention in computer science when we were learning Excel formulas and all of that, but luckily, you can reteach yourself. I need a tutor, Josh.
Can I just jump in quick? I feel like we've been talking about like math and statistics. So I just want to communicate that even if you're not a math person, there could be still a place for you in research. There is qualitative research where you do interviews with people, you do focus groups, and you're getting their like life story basically, and then you look for themes in that. So even if you're not into math, could still be a place for you. So I don't want people to get scared that data analytics, you need to know all this programming language. There are other avenues with data as well. So just seek those opportunities out if you're not a big math person.
I think it's a great point, a great call out. So thank you for saying that, because if I were a student right now, I might be shaking my boots a little bit if I wanted to get into data analytics but didn't like math. So I think, Cait, that's very helpful. So thank you for sharing that. Chris, go ahead.
One other thing I was just going to say is, like Cait said, you don't necessarily need a math background, but the most important thing I think is the two things really is how, and we talked about it earlier, is how to drill down all these complex math and statistics equations into a simple story, because, you know, the CEO of a club is not going to, one, necessarily care about the background of what you're trying to tell them. But if you can't figure out a way to properly explain that this long possible equation that you use to set pricing is why it's the way it is, you have to explain the variables behind it in a very easy to understand way as well. Well, these people like this, so it changes like this. And you have to be able to drill that down. And the other thing is time management and people management. I wouldn't be able to do my job because if I didn't have the right people around me. It is almost impossible to master all the trades that are necessary to run the analytics of a company. So you need to have a lot of smart people around you, and the management skills involved with that, as well as the time management skills, because I have my hands in just about every other facet in the company, whether that's marketing, whether that's sponsorship, whether that's IT, whether that's ticketing. You know, working with all these people, you have to find the time to allocate that and then get the right people to handle all those different things.
There we go. Do you have anything to add to the group, Mel?
You guys all hit it, like, nail on the head of everything I was going to say. So, like, just to emphasize, like, you can leverage a lot of your student, leverage a current project or experience or whatever class you're in and have it be an applicable one. That's exactly what I did, because I wasn't working for a sports organization before I landed this position. Two, you can always take a computer science class and learn a programming language or learn a new software or something that Josh had mentioned. And then to Chris's point of being able to speak what I call human terms and communicate your findings is one of the most valuable skills you can have as an analyst or working in data, because ultimately you have to tell the story, you have to present your findings. And so if you can get the information and analyze it, but then also communicate it, you're set.
Absolutely. That communication portion of it is incredibly important. You know, not everybody is an expert in data analytics. So being able to put it exactly as you said, Mel, in human terms is very helpful. Jared asked a good question in the chat. So I think that was the macro level of what students can do to prepare themselves. So I want to drill into a little bit more narrow of a focus for you all. And as Jared asked, what's the one skill that's been the most valuable for you so far in your career? It can be related to data analytics, doesn't have to, but one skill that you have found that's been the most helpful.
So just when I'm thinking about my best analysts, like who would I want to hire? It's always the people who are self-starters, who take initiative, who are very like lifelong learners. They're engaged, they want to learn. I think that's what's most important to me, because you can teach people the skills that you want to see on the job, but you can't teach taking initiative and doing things before you're asked and going above and beyond. That's something that's harder to teach. So I feel like I would look for a self-starter and someone who takes initiative.
That's a great call out. And, you know, I think, Jared, to speak to your question a little bit, Peggy and I just had a conversation about hard and soft skills the other day. And I think mine would gravitate towards Cait's, you know, the soft skills of even just being easy to work with, and being a team player. You could be the smartest person in the world, but if you're not easy to work with, it makes it really challenging. So I think just being open to new ideas, being a good teammate, and then the little things like being on time, being respectful of other people's time, those go a really long way. And I think it stands out when people don't do them, you know? So I think to piggyback off of Cait's point, those soft skills are really important to be an expert in. Josh, Chris, or Mel, any additions? Oh, sorry, Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, so to sort of piggyback on that, definitely for the people on this panel, I think it's a position and it's a part of the industry that's a lot more based on hard skills, but soft skills are very important in the analytics industry. And one that's been very important to me and for the people on my team are the people that show a level of humility, that aren't afraid to say what they don't know, and aren't afraid to ask questions, and aren't afraid to say even things like, I need more time, there's stuff on my plate, can you help me with this? Those are the people that I always see succeed more in the long run. A, because it's showing that they're a willingness to learn, but B, they also know their own limitations and they want to get it right as opposed to push through and risk something that is a deliverable that may not be up to the standards of our organization or our team. And they don't want to risk that, so they'll ask for help, but even if it's a once over check, even if it's something halfway through, even if it's right at the beginning. So even though the analytics side is very hard skill based in math, in other languages, and we see a lot of that, there is still a huge part of it that's soft skill.
That's a great point. And I know we're honing in on the top of the hour here, but I did want to ask this question because I think your answers would be really interesting. Maybe you all have that one really old school person at your organization who's like, I don't want this data. I don't need it. It's too much information. It's a data dump. All I see is a ton of numbers. Why do I need to understand this? What would you say to those types of people who give you pushback on data, and how would you emphasize its importance and role in your business?
I think it comes back to, I'm going to sound like a broken record, how do you turn all those numbers into something easy for them to interact with? Make it easy for them to understand, make it easy for them to interact with, especially when we're getting into a day and age where data visualization's a big thing now. Learning how to use Tableau or Power BI is very important because people most of the time learn through seeing, not necessarily through reading. So that's a really big thing for me, is turning all of these numbers and data to flow into a graph that they can play around with, click on, see what they want to find out. And another thing to that, you just got to not be afraid to fail, really. Don't be afraid to start digging into the questions that they're looking for and not find the answer. I've probably put together a million different ways to put together a equation or a data visualization, and it just doesn't work, or it just isn't what, it just doesn't give the answer that we're looking for. It might just give us a more bleaker picture perhaps. But if you just keep on at it, you'll be able to eventually find the best way to tell that story.
I think that's a great point. And, one of my executives had said at one point, make sure the data is relevant to something and put it in terms they understand. So if you're selling to somebody who is, again, in automobiles, talk to them about it in terms of cars. This could be this many cars. Or if you're selling to a dentist, like this is equivalent to you doing this many procedures to make this type of revenue, so on and so forth. So just making it relevant and catering to your audience and who you're talking to is just key, I think, in order to be successful. So that goes into the storytelling piece, which we could probably sit here and talk for 2 more hours about, but it is time that I let you all go. So for the East Coasters, it's almost time to hit the hay. And for the folks in Alaska, I'm sure you're just getting ready to eat dinner. So first of all, thank you, Chris, Josh, Cait, Mel, for your expertise and for your time. I know your schedules are incredibly busy, so the fact that you guys took an hour out of your day to spend with us, thank you. And to everybody on this call, appreciate you guys hopping on the call. I think this is a great step in what you can do to educate yourself in different facets of business and understand what you want to pursue and what you're passionate about. And before you hop off, I hope that you check the chat, because Peggy put some great resources in there for research grants or some courses you can take in order to pursue this vertical. So please make sure you check that and make note of it. And Cait, you read my mind. Connect with us all on LinkedIn. I say this every seminar if you've been on this one, and if you haven't connected with me or any of the panelists yet, please do it. Networking is a massive part of just getting to know what you want to do and getting help from those in the industry. So thank you again. Everybody have a great evening, and hopefully we'll chat with you soon. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.